In 1953, a steelworker's wife in Gary, Indiana fed a family of 6 on a single paycheck using a tin of bacon grease, a returned milk bottle, a darning egg, and a drawer full of saved string. She never threw out a jar. She never bought a thing she could not pay for that month. She never let a plate leave the table with food still on it. She was not unusual. She was ordinary. A whole generation ran the American household by a set of unwritten rules nobody ever wrote down, rules so common that writing them down would have seemed strange, like writing down how to breathe. Number 12 sat on the back of every stove in the country, and the government once paid you cash for it. Number 7 made it against the law to buy a loaf of bread on the wrong day of the week. And number 1 has been so completely forgotten that we now pay a monthly fee and a delivery charge for the exact thing our grandmothers set on the step every morning and got a nickel back for. These 15 rules were not quaint. They were the quiet operating system of the American household in the last decade before the country put everything on a tab. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 15 unwritten rules from 1950s America that the modern household quietly stopped following. Number 15. The dress to leave the house rule. A trip to the store was not an errand. It was an appearance. You put on a pressed shirt to buy a pound of coffee. Women wore gloves and a hat to walk to the A&P. The clothes were not for you. They were a message to the street about who raised you. For a young mother in Columbus, Ohio, a clean collar on a Tuesday told the whole block the family was holding together. Today we shop in the clothes we slept in, and nobody reads a thing into it. The standard did not protect anyone. It only asked them to try. Number 14, the Mr. and Mrs. rule. A child did not call a grown man by his first name. It was not optional. The man next door was Mr. Albright until the day you buried him. For a school teacher in Macon, Georgia, that one small word held the whole shape of the town in place. It marked who you were and who you were speaking to. We dropped it for warmth and called it friendliness. The distance it kept was the kind that taught a child where the edges were. Number 13. The clean plate rule. An unfinished plate was not a preference. It was a small failure of character. You took what you would eat, and you ate what you took. For a tenant farmer in eastern Kentucky who had watched the 30s take the farm next door, a scraped bin was not thrift, it was memory. Today, a third of the food this country buys never gets eaten. The rule was never really about the food. It was about not insulting the work that grew it. Number 12. The grease tin on the stove. A skillet of bacon fat was not waste to be poured down the drain. It was tomorrow's frying. The grease went through a fine strainer while still warm, into a tin kept on the back of the stove, and it kept for weeks. The science was sound. Rendered fat holds a smoke point near 375 degrees, hot enough to fry eggs, sear pork, or grease a pan. During the war, official collection stations paid housewives roughly 4 cents a pound for the surplus, because the fat could be distilled into glycerin for munitions. By the 50s, the tin had simply become habit. Nothing about it was poor. It was a free quart of cooking oil that arrived with every breakfast. For a coal miner's wife in West Virginia stretching one man's wages across 7 mouths, that tin was a line item that paid for itself. Today there is a product for this. It is sold as a vintage farmhouse bacon grease saver, enamel with a little strainer, and it runs $13 to $25. The tin did the same job for nothing. We did not invent the idea. We just started charging for it. Number 11. The string and rubber band drawer. A used jar was not trash. It was tomorrow's storage. Every kitchen had a drawer for string too short to use, bands too good to throw, foil smoothed flat for a second turn. For a seamstress in Lowell, Massachusetts, a wall of clean jars was a pantry she did not have to buy. The drawer looked like clutter to a stranger. To her, it was inventory. We buy organizers now to hold the things we used to save for free. Number 10. The darning egg. A hole in a sock was not a reason to buy socks. It was an evening's work. You slid a wooden egg into the heel and wove the gap shut on the singer or by hand. For a railroad man's wife in Omaha, Nebraska, a darned heel meant the dollar stayed in the jar. Today, socks come 6 to a pack for a few dollars, and a hole means the bin. The needle was never about the sock. It was about the idea that a small break was yours to fix. Number 9. The party line telephone rule. A phone line was not private. It was shared, sometimes with 4 other houses. You waited your turn, you kept it short, and you did not listen in on the Pruitts. For a dairy farmer in central Wisconsin, that line was a lesson in patience taught every single day. The rule asked you to want less so a neighbor could have some. Now each of us carries a private line and pays a bill that never ends. We got the privacy. We gave up the practice of taking turns. Pattern break. In 1958, Bank of America did something no one had asked for. It dropped 60,000 live credit cards into mailboxes across Fresno, California, already activated and ready to spend. They called it the Fresno Drop. It was the first time most Americans could buy something without having the money for it. The fraud was immediate, and the debt was permanent. The average American household now carries more than $6,000 in card debt. That is the country these rules belong to, ending in a single mailing. Number 8. The cash on the counter rule. A purchase was not a future problem. It was settled now. You paid in full or you put it on layaway and waited. And debt was a thing decent people were quietly ashamed of. For a foreman in Detroit, Michigan, owing money was a flaw to fix, not a tool to use. The Diners Club card arrived in 1950 and made the old shame feel old-fashioned. We call it convenience now. They called it not being square, and they did not like the feeling. Number 7. The Sunday closing rule. A shop open on Sunday was not a convenience. It was against the law. Blue laws shut the stores, and you planned your week or you did without. For a grocer in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the locked door on Sunday was simply the rhythm of the country. Run out of sugar and you knocked next door because there was nowhere to drive. The states began repealing those laws in the late 1950s. Now the store never closes, and we pay a delivery fee to avoid walking into it. The closed door did not cost us anything. It gave the week a seam. Number 6. The handwritten thank you note. Hospitality was not free. It carried a debt of thanks. After a dinner or an overnight stay, you sent a note, sometimes flowers or a small box of chocolates. For a hostess in Charleston, South Carolina, the note that came 2 days later was the proof that the evening had landed. We send a text now if we remember. The note took 10 minutes and a stamp. What it really cost was the admission that someone had done something for you. Number 5. The unlocked front door. A locked door in the daytime was not safety. It was an insult to the street. Doors stood open, keys sat in the ignition, and the children went out after breakfast and came home when the streetlights snapped on. Nobody counted them in between. For a mother in Levittown, New York, the open door was not naivety. It was a contract the whole block had signed without speaking. You watched my children at your end of the road and I watched yours at mine. The security system was the neighbor. It cost nothing and it watched everything because it had a face and a name and a casserole dish to return. Today we lock the door, then buy a camera for the porch. The video doorbell runs about $100, and to actually keep the footage you pay a subscription every month to watch your own front step. We did not make the street safer. We made it a stranger, and then we paid to watch it. Number 4, the standing rule. You stood when a woman or an older person entered the room. Not for show, for acknowledgement. For a boy in St. Louis, Missouri, getting to his feet was the first thing his hands learned to do without being told. The gesture said, "I see you and I owe you a small respect." We stayed seated and called it equality. What we lost was the habit of the body knowing how to honor someone. Number 3, the second life rule. In a careful kitchen, nothing was wasted until it had done a second job. Stale bread became pudding. Bones became stock. The Sunday roast became Monday's hash and Tuesday's soup. For a mother of 5 in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the trick was never a recipe. It was a refusal to let anything die useful. We throw the carcass out now and buy the broth in a box. Nothing in that kitchen was garbage until every part of it had been spent. Number 2, the borrowed cup of sugar. A shortage was not a trip to the store. It was a knock on a door. With the shop shut Sunday, you borrowed, and you paid it back in kind the next week. For a young wife in Wichita, Kansas, the empty sugar tin was a reason to know her neighbor's name. It was credit with no interest and no paperwork, secured by nothing but the certainty of seeing that face again. We have the 24-hour store now. We do not have the knock. Number 1, the milk bottle on the step. The simplest item on this list. The humblest. The one most completely erased from the American household, and the one that more than any other tells you what the decade believed. You rinse the empty glass bottle. You set it on the step at night with the payment tucked under it. By morning it was gone and a cold full one stood in its place. That same bottle made about 22 round trips before it ever broke, washed and filled and returned again and again, and the few cents of deposit came back to you in coin. For a dock worker's family in Baltimore, Maryland, it was breakfast that arrived before anyone woke. For a widow in Spokane, Washington, it was the one delivery that still came. For a sharecropper's household in the Mississippi Delta, it was a nickel that always came home. It cost a few cents and asked almost nothing, and it carried in one small piece of glass the whole quiet faith of a generation that things could be used, returned, and used again by people who fully expected to see each other tomorrow. These 15 rules were not quaint. They were a country that knew how to be finished with a thing. A grease tin on the stove, a bottle on the step, a darning egg in the basket, a cup of sugar from next door, a door left unlocked. They got the deposit back. We pay the fee. They owned it. We rent it. They settled every account by Sunday. We have not been square with anyone since.